Welcome to the Just Solutions podcast, where we explore relevant projects, policies, and stories from the perspective of the communities most impacted by climate change: Black, Indigenous, people of color, and those with lower incomes. I'm your host, Anika Goss-Foster, Executive Director of Just Solutions. In today's episode, we will discuss the environmental justice issues impacting Detroit residents and the community-led solutions actively addressing them. Today, I'm joined by Anika Goss-Foster, the Chief Executive Officer of Detroit Future City, a think and do tank focused on land use and sustainability, community and economic development, and economic equity in Detroit. Welcome, Anika, to the Just Solutions podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I lived in Michigan and I had the chance to work in Detroit. What really stuck with me and what struck me about Detroit is the deep love that people have for their city and the extraordinary history that's there, not just the auto industry, but the civil rights movement, broadly the labor movement, and amazing food. Unfortunately, most people think about Detroit and the challenges that are faced, but I think the challenges of Detroit are, in my opinion, reflective of a lot of broader problems we have in the U.S. I was born and raised in southern Indiana, not far away from where you are, and so also witnessed the change in industry leaving my hometown, the factories that my folks worked in no longer there, that whole shift that really came down. But I think Detroit's was probably a combination of things that happened that have created great challenges for Detroit, but also a great resiliency and strength and love that is so admirable about your hometown. For people who have not been to Detroit, paint a picture for us about what Detroit is like.
It's such an interesting place, mostly because you know a Detroiter once you've met them. And it's not because of the way they talk, it's more about their attitude. There are only a few cities around the country that you really see that. You see it maybe Pittsburgh, Oakland, Baltimore, where there are communities of multi-ethnic communities. I picked Pittsburgh because it's also mostly Black and white. Similar to Detroit is mostly Black and white, but there's also a very thriving foreign-born community and a thriving Latino community. They all came for these factory jobs, the $14 a day job. And we all have that experience in common. And as a result, it's a city that was sort of built on this factory worker mentality. You're all building something together. And the result is this amazing thing that the world is going to want. That is sort of the culture of Detroit. Over time, Detroit has become a majority Black city. 78% of the population are Black Americans. And that distinguishes us. There are very few minority-majority cities left. Like a lot of minority-majority cities, they come with a whole host of problems that large minority communities are experiencing. So concentrated poverty, underemployment, education attainment is lower, wealth generally is lower in comparison to white households, and Detroit is no different. However, these things also don't define Detroiters, but it certainly explains a lot of the conditions that we're living in right now that may seem unrelated, and climate is one of those issues.
Help us understand a little bit more about what happens in the Midwest. The impacts of climate change are happening all across the world. What happens in Detroit that is what you're experiencing as a result of climate change? And share with us a little bit more about the progression that took you from where you started as an organization and where you are today.
So our work was not originally based in climate impacts. Our work originally was based in moving blighted and large-scale vacant land to productive use. And we did that mostly with open space planning, but more so on the ground in neighborhoods. We were doing that by helping neighborhoods create community gardens and community spaces And we would distinguish ourselves from other urban farming activity as planting environmental sustainability installations. So, butterfly gardens, meadows, long stem planting, trees, tree farms, and neighborhoods. We made about 1.5 million in grants, and I think it was more like 3,000 gardens throughout Detroit. It was a lot. These gardens, not only were they placemaking and they were ways for neighbors to bring together, but what we noticed, the city of Detroit began to charge a drainage charge to Detroit residents. When they began charging Detroiters and their water bills went way up, that's when we really began to see this as a climate issue and how ill prepared Detroiters were for climate impacts. So when we began to see flooding in neighborhoods that we had just never really thought about, major flooding, like boating in the middle of the street flooding, we really began to see this as a much bigger problem than we could have ever imagined. And it was a problem that was out of our control. And a rain garden wasn't going to save this neighborhood from completely flooding out an entire block. And then what occurred to us was how much of this same kind of climate inability to be resilient to climate change was also directly related to a family's the valuation of their home, their stability of housing, their health generally. When there's large scale heat waves and blackouts, we didn't have any resilient centers. There were no cooling centers to put your medication in the neighborhood. This was really becoming much more of an economic crisis for families in Detroit and families in Detroit that had been in their neighborhood for a really, really long time and just did not have any way of preparing for this.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say because I think so much of the conventional climate conversation really is about the impacts of climate on the future, on families in the future. You can't deny the storms that are happening all across the country and that climate is having an impact today. So when you're working in the city of Detroit and this recognition that you come to and the connectivity that you have between your work and where we are and the impacts of climate change, how has it been in terms of people's engagement around the issue as you're out talking to communities and as communities are experiencing these things? Do they talk about the connectivity between climate change and their daily lives?
Yes. And one of the things that I thought was really fascinating was we host an equity forum every year at Detroit Future City. And we usually get, 300 to 400 people that show up. And we bring in a national speaker. And last year, we brought in Naomi Davis from Blacks in Green. And I assumed that the audience would be a lot of very young white hipsters that were interested in environmental sustainability, and it wasn't. It was a majority Black audience, gardeners, people who were really diligent, really, really active in the EJ community, in the environmental justice community. And the problem with the way we approach environmental sustainability is, and I say this all the time, there are two tables. There's an environmental justice table that's really mad about all of the issues and is Black and brown and has no money. And the environmental sustainability table, all white, a lot of scientists, and often that's also where the sustainable hipster crew hangs out. The climate impact, climate action brings both together, brings both of those communities together. So that was really the surprise for us, was like, whoa, okay. This is the Mack Avenue Block Club is here. They have a lot to say about their neighborhood being flooded last year and what they're trying to do about it.
I mean, how is that going in terms of having those tables work together?
It's going really well. This is what I would say, because the crossroad, that intersection of climate change and climate resilience is so, that by its very nature is embedded in both science and justice, that they sort of build off of each other. It becomes this really great marriage of thoughtful approaches to communities. So, one of the things that we're having a lot of conversations about right now in Detroit are land conservancies. And the reason that we want to lead with land conservancies is, especially in a place like Detroit that has 18 square miles of vacant land, is that it allows for neighborhoods to be able to say, we want this block, this part of our block, to remain green, intentionally green. We're going to put an urban forest here. We're going to put a meadow here. We're going to put a buffer here that will help with air pollutants, but also maybe manage snow when snow melts in the winter so that it doesn't overload the storm sewers. We want to be really thoughtful about the green that happens in our neighborhood. It doesn't have to be blighted. It can be intentionally productive to our neighborhood and add value. And we've been helping them do that. And the residents are thrilled about that. Like, yes, we're going to have like a community space and it's going to be beautiful in the middle of our neighborhood.
It's so wonderful to hear about the partnerships that are happening there. And I think that community led, community created solutions that really tap their expertise. And then you couple that with the conventional sustainability stakeholders to help build resources, to bring additional expertise is really just a great strategy. I reached out to you to be on our podcast to also talk about Detroit's effort to bring solar energy to communities. We all agree that solar power is a good thing. However, where solar panels are placed and whether people can access the energy they create can be challenging, especially when we consider equity. Detroit is putting solar panels in vacant lots in neighborhoods, and from what I understand from the local newspaper, the energy that is generated will not be available to people in that neighborhood. What are your thoughts about this approach?
Well, I don't know how the city arrived at this particular strategy for solar, so I don't want to speak for them. I will say my reaction has been neutral to that because they can't answer questions that I have about it, like who is actually the developer and how are they developing this solar. There are many blocks in Detroit where there's only one or two houses, and that does create quite a bit of land. You need at least 30 acres of contiguous acres in order to create a solar farm. The challenge with that is that as much as solar actually helps as a renewable energy source, it's an industrial investment and it creates heat islands in a way that I don't know that people really anticipated because it's still in the middle of a neighborhood. So we have to ask questions. Are you building buffers and trees in order to create cooling effects for this heat island that you're building there? The solar panels will only reduce the energy for government buildings, not the homes that these panels are going to in the middle of this neighborhood. It's tough, right? Because the response could have been, we're not doing it at all, which was DTE's first response. DTE is our utility company. The first response was, we can't have community solar, which is what Detroiters want. Detroiters want community solar to reduce their energy costs. And DTE's response was, we can't have community solar because we don't have enough contiguous land for solar. And this cuts into DTE profits. So that's also the challenge with that. The city's take is that we have to start with something. And this is a way for us to really get into the renewable space. And the residents that are participating, it's my understanding, they are participating voluntarily. They are getting Market Plus for their property. And the nearby neighbors are also getting energy efficient upgrades to their homes. I think it's yet to be seen how this is going to work and whether it works.
Yeah. Well, and the story that you share and what you're experiencing really struck me because we would all agree yes to solar. We would agree to benefits to community members. And I think we've witnessed this pivot towards equity. And I think we would all say that's very good too. And what you're sharing is then the implementation of that. So then how do we do that? There's so much to unpack about what you're experiencing and what you described. You have made this career of working with communities to bring green space to neighborhoods because there are vacant lots in Detroit. And I think that is such a powerful strategy. And you shared how communities get really excited about having green space. We all do in our neighborhoods. And now you have these places where these big black solar panels are being placed. And I know there's a lot of NIMBYism in there. I get that. But what's interesting is these are residential communities, albeit with vacant lots. They're residential communities with houses on streets, and then they're dropping in the large black solar panels. What do you think that does to a community? And how is it impacting your effort around green space development?
Well, it hasn't happened yet. So I think what we're worried about is that it will create heat islands and have like the opposite effect that we need to happen, exacerbating climate impacts in really vulnerable neighborhoods, neighborhoods that already are lacking trees or enough green space to even be able to mitigate for high heat and managing rain. I think there's probably something to also to say about valuation, and that I think is yet to be seen. One of the things we're concerned about is that there are still some census tracts in Detroit where there hasn't been any home ownership. There's no new home sales or no new mortgages and no warranty deed sales. A warranty deed sale means that the house is in good enough condition to actually issue a warranty deed to protect the deed to the home. If you don't have that, then they're fire sales, basically. So, like selling from the land bank or selling from the city, when you see the homes that are almost about to fall down. And those neighborhoods, I'm concerned that if they become partially industrial because there are these solar fields in them and there's no new mortgages in these census tracts, will that automatically pigeonhole that particular neighborhood into only being industrial or some other use, or devalue the homes that are there to the point where they further are isolated from generating wealth from their home?
I think that what you're talking about is the effort to rebuild Detroit, to build community in Detroit, to build green spaces in Detroit, and to build a thriving and resilient community. And that is, a difficult thing to do when you have large solar fields in those neighborhoods. And then I think that it's possible that that strategy is seen as an environmental justice strategy because those panels are benefiting low-income communities. In policy, you could say that fits as an EJ investment. But what you've laid out is that when those solar panels are placed in those communities and residents are given resources to essentially leave the community, that is potentially going to actually deconstruct the community, or at least it has the potential to undermine building community and community cohesion for sure. And then I think the benefits part makes sense, but again, I think both of us have a little reticence of like, this seems like a
Yeah,
this
yeah,
plan does not really seem like it's got the community at heart in the sense of the broader community objective. Individually, absolutely. Money on the table, you should take it if you can, but
yeah.
it's a strategy that seems rather short sighted and very narrow in its objective.
Yeah, I would definitely say we have not seen as much actual sustainable investment from the city. And I think a lot of cities are like that. To take on environmental sustainability as a municipality is tough business. It's expensive business. You hear about it nationally if someone actually does that. But I don't know enough about how they came to that decision. I only know what the program is. And I also know that the communities that they've gone into have been happy with the results. I've talked to a couple of people who have stayed, who haven't given up their property, and they negotiated other kinds of green investment around the solar. I think one of the things that I will say I'm concerned about is that we don't know enough about solar as a community, as a city, right? We haven't socialized how solar works, the positives and negatives. For me to call it an industrial development is probably foreign to a lot of people who might be living in this neighborhood that are impacted by that. So I feel like there's some work to do around that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The thing that for me was the most disappointing is that the energy that's generated by these solar panels is not going to be accessible to the actual residents that live next to them. And so that to me was just hard to believe that when you are working in community and low income communities and our focus is on reducing energy cost and solar energy can reduce energy cost, that the benefit of those solar panels were actually going outside of community. And that the discussion around solar wasn't one that happens within, when you talk to more affluent individuals who are using solar or accessing solar in their homes, they are financially benefiting from hosting those solar panels on their homes, then actually putting energy into the grid and making money off of that. And then we have this alternative reality in Detroit where the solar panels are next to homes and yet there's no financial benefit and then there's no access to the actual energy that's being created. And that to me was the other part that I found just grossly unfortunate. The federal government has made a commitment to environmental justice and benefits to communities, which we celebrate. And your story of what's happening in Detroit is just such an important case study of the complexity of delivering equitable benefits to communities.
The only thing I would say is that Detroit is a poor city. And financially, it's a poor city. It's also poor city government, right? Like they're not working with a lot of government. And so, one of the issues that the city government is always grappling with are cost savings and the return on investment to Detroiters. And I think that is how they're justifying that this is a cost reduction to a already limited resource city government.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make is what is the ultimate objective and how do we get there? And so I guess my question for you is if you were running things, you're running the city of Detroit, what do you think the right approach should be in really building a resilient, thriving city?
There are a lot of things that I've seen in other cities that I wish we were doing here. We have 900 vacant factories, industrial buildings, and dozens of large skyscraper downtown large buildings that are 10 floors or higher, right? There's so much that you could do with just those buildings. I feel like they probably could have had the same impact if they put solar on all that vacant industrial, because all that vacant industrial is very difficult to tear down because each one is a brownfield site. But the reuse of that, if you're going to use an industrial reuse, we could have done that. We could put green roofs on all of that downtown space. Toronto has an amazing project that for any new downtown development or renovation, you have to have some sort of sustainability investment that goes along with it. And now they have more green roofs than any city in the world. It's an amazing approach to this. We're a water city, we're a river city. And so that's another challenge because we are a river city. Like most river cities, the first 100 years were used for industrial purposes. But we now have the best river walk in the United States. There's a lot more that we can do with that for sustainability. So I think that there are a number of opportunities, because I used to work at the city years ago. And when you're at the city, when you're in city government, when you're in the mayor's office, your focus in serving the people, it's the constant motion of how to fix everything. So you're not spending a lot of time on innovation, creativity. You're just constantly fixing a problem. We have a very close relationship with every single department at the city, and including the mayor's office. The role that we can play as a separate nonprofit that's separate and apart from the city is to bring these kinds of innovative ideas. Now, they still will make decisions and cut their own deals with the utility company and build solar panels that will reduce the cost for only government buildings. They might make those decisions anyway. I don't know what went into that. But meanwhile, we are pushing for a land conservancy that will allow for residents to have more control to what happens in their neighborhoods in the future.
Yeah. And what strikes me is that so many of the great migration cities, much like Detroit, Cleveland, Milwaukee, are places that are majority Black. They are places that have a lot of unused infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
They have a rich history. And I really think they hold a lot of promise as far as the places where we may need to be in the future if climate change and migration actually comes to be. And there's a real opportunity for us to invest in those cities to really lead the way. And I think that what you're doing is so inspiring. I think that it's just been such a pleasure to talk with you and learn more about the work that you're doing and to help us understand the complexity of solving these problems, but at the same time, helping us understand that it's possible and it can be simpler if we let community lead. Thank you, Anika, for being with us today, and thanks to our listeners for joining us on the Just Solutions podcast. Special thanks to our producer, Taylor Ward, and our recording engineer and editor, Angel Batista. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to know more about our work at Just Solutions, visit our website at justsolutionscollective.org. You can also follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook for the latest updates. Together, we are driving community-created and equity-centered solutions to the climate crisis. We hope you'll join us for the next episode.